But let's talk about your book, because what I find fascinating about it. Well, first of all, we've talked about some of the books you've written in the past, but you use stories. They're based on stories. Once you go through a case, or if you settle certain things, obviously there's certain things that you are bound by the court. You can't reveal. However, there's opportunities to fictionalize things.
Yeah.
And in your latest work, I recognize, at least, and I don't know if you work directly on this, but certainly I know you guys, your firm does a lot of stuff where there's financial fraud involved and whatnot. But the story of HSBC's money laundering problems they had.
It's ridiculous to even speak those words, isn't it? That HSBC and a dozen other banks through Europe and America laundered money for terrorists and drug cartels. And when the smoke cleared, HSBC had signed a document that said this exactly. Yes, we did launder money. Yes, we made billions of dollars doing it. Yes, we understood it was going to kill American contractors and American soldiers, European contractors, European soldiers. Yes, we did all those things. And gee whiz, we're willing to pay $1 billion to get out of it, $1.6 million. And so this was criminal. It was criminal conduct. You understand? There's no question. The documents were overwhelming. And so Eric Holder allowed them to, and Loretta Lynch from the AG's office under Obama, allowed them to sign the document, and nobody went to prison. Okay? And that, to me, is kind of the salient part of this story. We represent a couple of thousand people that are in the what you call the gold family. They're people that their families they've lost their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, brothers.
Gold Star families.
Family. Yeah. And it's regarded as something else in the book, but it's what we're talking about. And so the problem is, until you say to corporate America, you can dress up all you want to dress up. You can put on the finest suits and drive the finest cars, but we're still going to perp walk you when you kill people. Same way with the opioid case. I wrote a book called Law and Addiction there, and it was all true. This case, this is a true story. I mean, has it been dressed up? Of course. The intensity's been added to it, but it's a true story. And so, and in this story, for example, the horrible thing about the bank story washing money is you had judges just awful decisions about how it's okay. We're going to allow banks to do that. That issue is literally up on appeal right now.
Well, I want to talk about this, from how it applies to the work that I know that you guys have done, and I know that Chris Paulos has provided some sort of like consulted and you work with in the firm.
He knows more about this than anybody.
And I think I've interviewed him about some of these topics in the past. But basically, the dynamic is this, and we should say with the HSBC, the part I remember about that story was that they had to literally change their teller windows.
That's right.
So to fit the boxes of money, of cash that were coming through from drug cartels.
Well, it wasn't just drug cartels. It was also front companies for terrorists.
And so basically what this is like, you can't, and I want to get into this because I think there's been some developments as to whether you can hold or how you hold, let's say, Iran, accountable for terrorist acts that have killed people. But a lot of times we're talking about oil companies, we're talking about banks, right. We're talking about maybe other companies that essentially evade sanctions and or essentially provide the mechanism for the funding of these terrorist acts.
Yeah, the law is very...
It costs money.
The law is very clear. After JASTA, after 9/11, there was some law called JASTA. And basically, without going into too much detail, it's a law that says if you've participated in the furtherance of terrorism, you may be sued in a civil court. Okay? Or if you are on a terrorist list, if you're a country that's on a terrorist, you may be sued in civil court. So we've gotten, as you probably know, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars from Iran. And now everybody's in a holding pattern to try to get those judgments secured and executed on. But it will happen. But
these are assets that are frozen. They're in
correct.
U.S. banks, and they're basically kept there to ensure that in the event that there's a finding against them in a civil court, that they pay. It's more or less like, I don't know, like the bond that was required of Donald Trump recently.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so the problem is, though, Sam, I mean, you're always going to be able to take their money away. But what if one time, whether it was the opioid case, where 150 people died every day for decades, what if you throw a dozen of them in prison, and then an MBA school at Harvard or Yale or Princeton, 10 years from now, they said, you know what? Don't take a chance. Uncle Joe went to prison for 10 years. And that changes culture. Nobody goes to prison. You might remember, and when Obama was running for president, don't you remember he said, by God, I'm going to put these people in prison that caused the burn down. We know who they are. The evidence is overwhelming, and it was absolutely overwhelming. They knew they were stealing from mom and pop pension programs. Nobody went to prison. Why is that? And, I think it was Eric Holder who had famously said, or maybe it was his number two, Lanny, I want to say Brewer. Maybe it was. What a bomb. What an absolute bomb.
They said, not just too big to fail, but also like too big to jail.
Too big to jail. Oh, no, their big talking point was, after this promise, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to have an attorney general that does something. All of a sudden, within 2 months, the new talking point became we just have to look ahead. Right, we can't look back. But the risk in not looking back is it happens again. The risk in not putting these people in prison is it happens again. Suspicious activity analyzes it. And it does it in a way that it's fun reading. It's a good story. There's no way you're going to read this story and be bored. You're going to be entertained to the point I really think it's a page turner. It's gotten great reviews because it moves quickly. But so you're entertained, and at the same time, you're learning something that most people don't even know about.
Right.
They don't know how the banks have become, the criminality of these banks in the United States. This is just one example of it. And is there something in here? I mean, because, for years, and I've been coming to this conference now for probably close to a decade, maybe more actually. We're getting old a little bit, but I got more gray hair than you.
I don't know about that, but the theme has always been, for the most part, corporations are knowingly, essentially, allowing people to be harmed in the pursuit of their profits. And
because they can get away with it, Sam.
Is there something about, do we have the laws on the books to go after these people criminally? Obviously, you're going after civilly.
Of course.
Or is there something in the structure of corporations
No.
That legally shields them?
There is not. There is not. The conduct could be interpreted just like any individual. Was there intent? Was there indicia of intent? Was there enough to present this indicia of intent to a jury? Should we allow the jury to decide rather than some politician making a call to people like Eric Holder, who, oh, by the way, is now working for Covington Burling?
Right.
You understand, that is the premier white-collar criminal firm in America. He has almost a whole damn floor up there, okay? So he goes from attorney general, where he lets all these white-collar criminals go, to working for the firm that helps engineer it all the time. And the problem, Sam, is we've become so tribal that we can't even analyze that objectively because, well, he's a Democrat. And, I'm a Democrat. And I can't talk about Obama or Holder and maybe something they did that was awful, because I'm a Democrat. Republicans do the same thing.
Right,
both sides. But how do you?
But isn't part of the problem less about that people are saying it's because I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, but rather it's like I work in business. Like, I mean, isn't there a mentality of like, well, I mean, corporations, it seems to me, are set up as a way of diffusing responsibility, both legally, but also I think like morally on at some point. Like, like I've talked to people who work in, let's say, for-profit universities, which, is a pretty sketchy.
Oh, extremely sketchy.
Some of these are Fortune 500 companies.
I know.
And there is a sense, that we're doing good. We're trying to educate people, and they're sort of not paying attention to actually sort of like what the other part of this is, which is 99% of your money comes from the federal government and trying to keep people, to get their second check. And there's this sense of like, well, in my silo, I'm doing okay.
Yeah. In suspicious activity, what I tried to make everybody understand, and understand, I've handled the biggest cases in the country.
Yes.
I handled tobacco. I handled opioids. I handled PFAS. I handled 80 of the largest pharmaceutical cases in the country. And here's what people don't get. Most of the time, when the conduct is really bad, like we're working this CPAP case right now, my God, you should read the documents. As you read the documents, you realize the person on the other side of the table from you is a sociopath. And we can't even process that because it's too painful to believe that we have a system in this country that's so wholly unchecked that we can allow a sociopath to make a decision that kills 150 people a day, and that there's no finding of responsibility. That in the opioid case, yeah, they settled for $52 billion. So what? They made $100 billion a year. Okay.
It's the functional equivalent of like, I've got to buy these microphones to do this show.
And you really want to hear the suffering? You know who pays for the $52 billion? Taxpayers.
Right. Because
they write it off and taxpayers pay for it. But we've become, I really, and I hate to say this.
They write this, I just want to be clear on this. When they are paying a fine, or in the instance of they're paying a civil liability, it's a tax write-off, like it's an expense.
The only thing that's not is the punitive damages, but most of it is a write-off. And so how do we turn that around? I mean, like I say, most of the time when I'm across the table, I realize if I had a DSM-5 in front of me and I'm doing check to a sociopath, that's what I'm talking to. But it's become the norm. And I think we've reached the point of no return. Okay. Both political parties have had a shot to try to do something about it. You want to hear real irony, Sam? The last president of this country that did anything about it was Ronald Reagan. He sent 800 bankers to prison. 800 over the
savings and
SML,
loans? Yeah.
savings and loan. Sent them to prison.
Yep.
Now, that's unheard of. And then all of a sudden, we start saying, well, okay, we can't do that because, well, there's no answer to because. The because part is because the Department of Justice is, they're just beat down with lawyers who are career lawyers. Why are they going to take on a tough case? I mean, they're going to get paid the same thing day in, day out, whatever the GS, whatever that is. Hell, I don't know what it is. But so they're going to make the same salary. Or the other part of them, the other part of that group is looking for a bigger job. You see?
Right.
So how do you get the Department of Justice to say, jump in there, buddy, do something? Yes, you might lose the case. That's what we do as trial lawyers. We might lose the case, but if we don't take a chance on it and we don't take a shot, nothing in this country changes. And I hate to even say this, but I think we have reached the point of no return.
I want to get back to that. It's a little bit it's
a
little disheartening.
It's disheartening.
I don't know if you ever read that book, The Chicken Shit Club by Jesse Ettinger.
I did.
He is a ProPublica writer who wrote about essentially the failures of the Holder regime to go after corporate criminals in that respect.
ProPublica did the best job handling that topic. Them and a woman named Lerner, who was just excellent on it.
What makes you, when you say that we're past the point of no return, does that mean that there's never an opportunity where there's going to be, I mean, because for instance, for instance, we're watching sort of the revival of antitrust. Not the same necessarily thing, but we're watching a revival of it. You can't turn
Antitrust doesn't put anybody in prison.
No, I agree.
All it does is it arms the Department of Justice with more money. They get to keep money. You see, they hit a criminal and they hit a big fine. That money goes to the Department of Justice. It disappears somewhere. I mean, somewhere in the governmental process. But nobody goes to prison.
Nobody goes to prison. But my point being that you had a very dormant sort of aspect of our law where you could allow these companies to merge and to acquire each other and to become monopolies. And that's, it's a long process, but that has reversed. I mean, it really is 180 degrees from where we were even, 10 years ago, 5 years ago in terms of antitrust. And I wonder if we can't get there with corporate accountability.
There is no such thing as a corporate accountability, Sam. I mean, I know you don't want to hear this. People don't want to hear what I know. Of course you don't.
I want to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear this. I've been doing it for 40 years. I've been in the courtroom more than any trial lawyer you will talk to for 40 years confronting this. And I went through the time when I was optimistic. I was always waiting for that political party, that leader to rise up and say, damn it, this is not fair to the American public. It's a total double standard because some kid in a hoodie selling 10 ounces of marijuana is going to go to prison for 10 years. And we're letting people kill people just in reckless abandon. There's no mistake here, Sam. When you read these documents, I read them and I have to live with these documents day to day. And suspicious activity, those are documents we see. And the way they thumb their nose at the justice process. They know, so what? So what we get caught? So what we pay $1 billion? Nobody goes to prison. Now, you tell me, do you see any vision of somebody rising up and saying, I'm going to change all that?
No,
I don't either.
No, I don't. And in fact, I think, and I will say that even as my attempt to be hopeful, you could see the antitrust movement building over the past 10 years. I mean, it was there and it was on the outside.
Antitrust is a civil process.
I'm making more of a general analogy that we saw a change in enforcement. Granted, it's not criminal enforcement, but it's a change in enforcement. It's a change in an orientation on that law. And
we still see you understand, we determine after Citizens United that a corporation is a person.
Right.
After 5 cases that came after Citizens United, we make the declaration that a corporation is a person. If you had a psychopath that had killed thousands of people, you put the psychopath in prison. You don't say to the psychopath, you pay us $100 million, you're going to walk free. It doesn't change anything, Sam. And I'd love to say there's a quick solution here, but there's not. It is so much a part of our culture. And the people listening to this go, God, that sounds awful. And there's got to be better news here. I would love to deliver better news. I don't know where it is. I have no vision of it. The most optimism I ever had was when Obama made this ridiculous proclamation that he was going to do something to change it. And then he gets in office and realizes all this money comes from these very people that he's talking about. Do you realize even his appointments to the federal bench, his appointments came from these silk stocking law firms that represent these corporate criminals? Those were his appointments. 3/4 of his appointments.
Totally. And do you think that Biden has, at least in terms of like the federal judiciary, since you raised it, has done a better job in that respect?
I think his balance has been better. I do believe that. I think he's, it's kind of his appointments. Sometimes you see they're, public defenders or they come from the trial, they come from real trial experience. And that's great. That's important. But until a judge, and look, don't miss this either. A judge has the ability to say to the damn Justice Department, do something.
Right.
Okay? I've reviewed this case, do something. Do you know how few judges do that? Even to get to that part?
And part of that is because
They come
they come from all of these law firms, and it's this the water that they swim in. They're not even aware that it's necessarily that there's an issue here.
Of course not. They've made all of their money. They've never represented a consumer. They've always been on the side of a corporation. Can you imagine, Sam, being the lawyer for a corporation, and your best day, your day of success, is sitting around the dinner table at night and telling your children that you had a really good day today because you kept 1,000 people from recovering money after you know that the company you represent killed them and maimed them. That's your good day. But they're lining up to do that in this country right now.
Well, Mike Papantonio, does the book have a happy ending?
The book has
the suspicious activity.
The book has all of my books have a happy. And you know why, Sam? You know why?
We need it.
We need it because every day we wake up with these realities, and we're thinking to ourselves, "Damn it, let the good guys win." Not only do the good guys win in this, but they wreak havoc on the bad guys. And that's how all my books end, because it gives you a sense that there's a possibility that at least you can read a book and think, I had a good day today.
But it is, I will say this, it is also important to be able to imagine a system of government and a society that holds these people to account. I mean, that's
to visualize it, right?
Exactly.
You have to visualize it before it even becomes a possibility.
We will put a link to Suspicious Activity, a legal thriller, at majority.fm, and of course in the podcast and YouTube description. Mike Papantonio, always a pleasure. So glad to catch you up, and congratulations on the book. It is really burning up the charts, and so I'm glad to see that.
And they will like the ending. They will empower them, even though reality may shun them. It will empower them.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Mike Papantonio, again, thanks so much.